The SEC Game of the Week is back at Bama for a top 25 matchup between the Crimson Tide and the Razorbacks. For Alabama, the stakes are clear. Win Saturday, and they punch their ticket to the SEC championship game against the top-ranked Georgia Bulldogs. And while Alabama continues to ride the hot hand of Heisman Trophy contender Bryce Young, Nick Saban trying to keep the focus on the present.
It's our last game in Bryant-Denny Stadium. That's been a great atmosphere to play in, and it's certainly needed to be that way for this game.
And Alabama is a 20-point favorite. Arkansas is on the rise under head coach Sam Pittman, and they have a head-to-head win against Texas A&M, the only team to beat Alabama this season. A win Saturday would not only shake up the playoff race, it would put the Hogs in position for a New Year's Six bowl.
I was really proud of our guys being down at half, coming back. It wasn't pretty, but when that ball went through the uprights, it was one of the prettiest things I'd ever seen.
But it has been a long time since Arkansas beat Alabama, pre-Nick Saban times back in 2006 when Mike Shula was the head coach in Tuscaloosa. It's the SEC Game of the Week between Arkansas and Alabama, Saturday, 3:30 Eastern on CBS.
All right, it's style point season in college football. Coming off a close win over LSU, Alabama blew out New Mexico State last week 59-3. Currently sitting at number 2 in the country, they seem destined for a meeting in Georgia in the SEC title game. But first, they have to get through number 21 Arkansas and Auburn to finish out the year. Now, here's a look at Bama's resume. Ranked wins against Miami and Florida don't look great. They won big against Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Tennessee, but will it be enough? And on that note, let's bring in college football writer Barrett Sallee. What does the Crimson Tide have to do between now and the SEC title game to impress the selection committee, whether or not they win or lose in the SEC title game?
Well, if they win the SEC championship game, I don't think they have a whole lot to worry about. I think they would stay in that number 2 spot. I think if they lose this win, it gets really interesting because we've seen dominoes fall around the country. And I do think there's a scenario where a 2-loss Alabama at least has a chance. But style points absolutely would matter at that point. And I think the biggest thing with Alabama is they can't block. Specifically, they can't run block. We saw against LSU 6 total yards on the ground. That's unacceptable. Against Florida in that narrow win, they couldn't run the football. So in these tough games, Tennessee sort of the same thing. They're unable to get that push on the line of scrimmage. And I think the committee knows that. There are enough great football minds on that committee where they recognize, hey, this team's not only flawed, but it's flawed to a point where it can't be fixed, or at least it hasn't been fixed. So over the next 2 games, I think you need to watch how Brian Robinson moves. That poor guy had nowhere to go against LSU because that offensive line was so bad. So I think if they are able to fix that rushing attack, you're talking about a 2-loss Bama team potentially being in that mix because they would be a complete team at that point, but they would still need dominoes to fall.
All right, well, some teams are fighting to get in the college football playoffs. Others are fighting for head coaches or trying to fight and figure out if they want their head coach. Manny Diaz and Coral Gables certainly on the hot seat after the Canes dropped their AD, Blake James. Many think Diaz is the next domino to fall. Is his time up in Coral Gables at the end of the year?
Yeah, I think it is, because when you lose your AD, then the guy who hired you is no longer there to be your advocate. So I think you can start connecting some of these dots here. And with that said, though, I think whoever comes in at Miami, whether it's Manny Diaz or somebody else, you have a lot to be excited about. 7 straight games, they've scored 28 or more points. They have won 3 of their last 4. But I think at this point, a 500 record, a loss to Florida State last week, and just the general feeling around the program, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of hope. So I do think Manny Diaz is on his way out. The Blake James decision certainly leads to that belief a lot more. But it does depend on who's out there, because if you're Miami, you have to look around. Do you want to get into a market that includes LSU, that includes USC, that includes Virginia Tech, and potentially we'll see about Florida? So, it's going to be an interesting decision for the decision makers in Coral Gables.
All right, Mario Cristobal, obviously a household name by this point in college football. Mel Tucker becoming one, and it helps when you reportedly have a 10-year, $95 million deal on the table at Michigan State. How does this affect the landscape of the job openings across the country and the type of money that some of these coaches might get?
Well, I don't think it matters as far as some of the high-profile job openings, because if Mel Tucker was going to move, he would move to LSU, move to USC. That's kind of where he would be, and those programs would absolutely pay that. But I do think it definitely shows that some of these middle to upper-tier programs are certainly willing to shell out the kind of money to be a big-time program. This is comparable to what Jimbo Fisher got at Texas A&M. That's how much Mel Tucker would be raking in with this contract. So I don't necessarily think it would change all that much, because still the pool that Mel Tucker would be in is still the same, and certainly those programs have that money. But I think now, again, sort of like the same thing with what happens with Oregon and Mario Cristobal, Mel Tucker's looking around going, hey, you know what? Michigan State, my team's been in the top 10 for the last month, been in the top 25 for 2 months. If you win the Big Ten East, you can win a national championship. So I think that's the mindset now with some of these jobs is, okay, yeah, it's not as prolific as some of these other ones like the LSUs or USC, but you can still win national championships. And again, that's the ultimate goal. And if you can make that kind of money and have a clearer path, then that's a lifestyle you kind of want to live.
That is a lot of money, Barrett. Thank you so much for your insight on that. Plenty to look forward to as the coaching carousel begins to spin. Now, for more on college football, check out the Cover 3 podcast. Chip Patterson and Barton Simmons have you covered from recruiting to the college football playoff.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.